The notification popped up on my laptop at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was reviewing quarterly reports for the manufacturing plant I managed in Columbus, Ohio, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Thought you should know what your wife does during her yoga classes. Attached was a photo. My stomach dropped before my brain could fully process what I was seeing. There was my wife of 9 years, Rebecca, pressed against some guy in what looked like a hotel room. Her distinctive auburn hair was unmistakable, as was the silver bracelet I'd given her for our anniversary last month. The timestamp on the image showed it was taken 3 days ago, last Saturday afternoon, when she'd told me she was attending a special workshop downtown. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hand. The numbers on the spreadsheet in front of me blurred into meaningless figures. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching this happen to someone else. Another message came through. Room 412, Riverside Inn. Every Tuesday and Saturday, 2 to 5 p.m. Sorry, man. I checked the time again. 2:49 p.m. Tuesday. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my keys. The Riverside Inn was only 15 minutes from my office. I told my assistant I had an emergency and left without further explanation, barely registering her concerned expression. The drive felt both endless and too short. Part of me hoped this was some cruel prank, a case of mistaken identity. Maybe it wasn't Rebecca. Maybe the photo was doctored. But deep down, I already knew. Little things that hadn't made sense suddenly clicked into place. Her newfound interest in expensive lingerie, the way she'd started keeping her phone face down, how she'd been too tired for intimacy with me, but somehow had energy for these supposed yoga sessions twice a week. I pulled into the Riverside Inn parking lot at 3:04 p.m. It was a mid-range hotel, the kind business travelers used. Nothing fancy but respectable enough. Rebecca's white Honda Civic was parked in the third row. I'd bought her that car 2 years ago when she started her job at the marketing firm. The Becca vanity plate I'd surprised her with for her birthday mocked me from across the lot. So it was real. I sat in my truck for 5 minutes, trying to decide what to do. Burst in and confront them? Wait and gather more evidence? Call a lawyer first? My mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last. We had 2 kids, Emma, 7, and Tyler, 5. What would this do to them? The rational part of my brain, the part that had helped me climb from floor supervisor to plant manager, started taking control. I needed documentation. I needed proof that would hold up if this went where I thought it was going. I pulled out my phone and took photos of her car in the lot, making sure the license plate and hotel sign were visible in the frame. Then I called the hotel's front desk. "Riverside Inn, how may I help you?" a cheerful voice answered. "Hi, I'm supposed to meet my wife for a surprise, but I forgot which room she's in. Rebecca Walsh? She checked in earlier today." "Let me see. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out guest information." "I understand. Thanks anyway." I hung up before she could say more. Plan B. I walked into the lobby, trying to look casual despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The hotel had 4 floors, and if the anonymous tip was accurate, I needed the 4th floor. I took the elevator up, my reflection in the mirrored walls showing a man I barely recognized, pale, jaw clenched, eyes hard. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in a generic blue pattern. Room 412 was halfway down on the right. I stood outside the door, listening. Faint sounds from within. Voices, movement. I couldn't make out words, but one voice was definitely Rebecca's. That laugh I'd heard 1,000 times over breakfast, during family movie nights, at our kids' school events. I pulled out my phone and started a voice recording, holding it near the door gap. I stood there for 2 minutes, capturing muffled sounds, then took photos of the door number, the hallway, anything that established location and time. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. Picking up groceries after my session. Need anything? The casualness of the lie made my blood run cold. I typed back, "We're good. Drive safe." I couldn't confront her here. Not yet. I needed to think, to plan. I'd built a good life through careful planning and execution, and I wasn't going to throw that away in a moment of rage, no matter how justified. I left the hotel and sat in my truck, watching the entrance. At 4:53 p.m., the door opened and Rebecca walked out, followed by a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, wearing business casual clothes. They didn't kiss goodbye or even touch. Too cautious, probably. But the body language was unmistakable. Comfortable. Familiar. This wasn't a first-time thing. I took photos of them together, of him walking to a black Audi, of his license plate. Then I followed Rebecca's car from a distance as she drove to the Kroger on 5th Street, watching her go inside and actually buy groceries, playing the role of faithful wife doing household errands. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't known better, I'd never have suspected a thing. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop and sat in the parking lot, forwarding all the photos to my personal email and backing them up to cloud storage. Then I started researching divorce attorneys in Columbus. I spent the next 3 days operating on autopilot. Tuesday night, I'd come home at the usual time, kissed the kids, asked Rebecca about her day. She'd smiled and told me about a client meeting, mentioned the grocery store, complained about traffic. The performance was flawless. Wednesday morning, I called in sick to work. First time in 2 years. After Rebecca dropped the kids at school and headed to her office, I drove to the address I'd found in her desk drawer the night before, buried under old birthday cards and tax documents. View Manor. A single-story assisted living facility on the east side of town, tucked behind a stand of oak trees off Highway 33. The sign out front advertised "Compassionate care for your loved ones" in faded blue letters. Rebecca's name was on the incorporation documents I'd found, listed as managing director. I'd never heard her mention it. Not once in 9 years. The parking lot was half empty at 9:47 a.m. I counted 6 cars, including a black Audi parked near the side entrance. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like industrial cleaner and something else. Something medicinal and stale. A reception desk sat empty, computer monitor dark. No one called out a greeting. I walked down the main hallway, footsteps echoing on linoleum. Past a common room with a television playing to an empty couch. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed. The first resident I saw was in room 104. An elderly woman, maybe 80, slumped in a wheelchair by the window. Her head lolled to one side, mouth open, eyes half closed. A line of drool traced her chin. "Hello?" I said. No response. Her breathing was shallow, regular. Deeply asleep or heavily sedated? Room 106 held an elderly man in similar condition, sprawled across his bed fully clothed, one arm dangling off the side. His bedside table was empty, except for a plastic cup of water. My pulse quickened. Room 108, room 110. Same scene, different faces. 6 residents, all unconscious or barely responsive. The facility was silent except for the hum of air conditioning and distant voices coming from somewhere deeper in the building. I followed the voices to a room at the end of the hall. The door stood partially open. Through the gap, I saw Rebecca. She was standing beside a hospital bed, holding a clipboard. The man from the hotel, tall, mid-30s, wearing khakis and a polo shirt, stood next to her, examining documents. Between them lay an elderly woman, completely unresponsive, an oxygen tube in her nose. "The Williams estate cleared yesterday," the man said. "Power of attorney transferred smoothly. No family contest." Rebecca made a note on her clipboard. "That's 4 this quarter, better than last year." "The medication protocol is working. Dr. Brennan's been cooperative." "He should be, considering what we're paying him." Rebecca's voice was businesslike, efficient. "What about the Patterson assets?" "Still in probate. His daughter's been asking questions." "Stall her. We need another month to liquidate the bonds." I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, and started recording through the gap in the door. The man moved to a dresser against the far wall and opened the top drawer. Most of her jewelry's already cataloged, but I found this in the back. He held up a gold necklace with a pendant. Probably worth $3,000. Rebecca glanced at it. "Add it to the inventory. We'll move it with the next batch." "When's the transfer?" "Friday night, same as always. Make sure the residents are dosed appropriately. Can't have anyone wandering around asking questions." My stomach turned. I kept recording. The man pocketed the necklace and picked up a small painting from the dresser. "What about this?" "Take it. Everything goes." Rebecca checked her watch. "I need to get to the office, real office. Make sure the afternoon medications are administered on schedule. I don't want anyone coherent when the state inspector does her walkthrough next week." "Already handled. Brennan's adjusting the dosages." They moved toward the door. I stepped back quickly, pressing myself against the wall of an adjacent room. They passed within 5 feet of me, Rebecca's heels clicking on the linoleum, neither of them glancing in my direction. I waited until their footsteps faded, then slipped into the room they'd just left. The elderly woman in the bed didn't stir. Her breathing was shallow, mechanical. A medication chart hung from a hook at the foot of the bed. Margaret Holloway, 84 years old. The dosage list was extensive. Sedatives, anti-anxiety medications, sleep aids. All prescribed by Dr. Lawrence Brennan. I photographed everything. The chart, the empty dresser drawers, the oxygen equipment, the room number. Then I moved through the facility systematically, documenting each resident, each medication chart, each stripped bare personal space. In the administrative office, I found filing cabinets unlocked. Inside, power of attorney documents, estate transfer forms, financial statements showing systematic withdrawals from resident accounts, property deeds, stock certificates, life insurance policies with Rebecca listed as beneficiary. 12 residents total. Average account balance before admission, $340,000. Current average balance, $18,000. I photographed every document I could find, my phone's storage filling rapidly. Uploaded everything to the cloud in real time, paranoid about losing evidence. In the bottom drawer of Rebecca's desk, I found a ledger. Handwritten entries tracking acquisitions and liquidations. Names, dates, amounts. The most recent entry was dated 2 days ago. Holloway Estate, final transfer complete. Net proceeds, $287,000. The black Audi was still in the parking lot when I left at 11:33 a.m. I photographed it, including the license plate, then sat in my car and called the Ohio Department of Aging. "I need to report elder abuse at an assisted living facility," I told the woman who answered. "Multiple residents are being systematically drugged and their assets are being stolen." She took down the information with practiced efficiency. Facility name, address, number of residents, asked if I had evidence. Extensive documentation, I said. Photos, financial records, medication charts. I can send everything immediately. We'll dispatch an investigator today. Can you provide contact information in case we need additional details? I gave her my cell number, then called the Franklin County Adult Protective Services, repeated the same information. Then the State Medical Board to report Dr. Brennan. By noon, I'd contacted 4 separate agencies. At 12:47 p.m., I was sitting in the parking lot of a law office on Broad Street. Gerald Thompson, attorney at law. Specialized in elder abuse cases according to his website. His office smelled like old books and coffee. He was mid-50s, gray hair, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I spent 90 minutes walking him through everything. The affair discovery, finding the facility documents, what I'd witnessed that morning, the evidence I'd gathered. He reviewed the photos on my phone with increasing intensity, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "This is extensive," he said finally. "Organized financial exploitation, falsified medical records, systematic sedation to facilitate theft. You're looking at multiple felony charges. Wire fraud, theft from the elderly, Medicaid fraud if any of these residents were receiving benefits." What happens next? Adult Protective Services will investigate immediately. They're required to respond within 24 hours for situations involving imminent danger. The state will likely revoke the facility's license and relocate the residents. Criminal charges will follow. He paused. Your wife and her accomplice are facing significant prison time. How long? Ohio takes elder abuse seriously. Financial exploitation of the elderly, especially with vulnerable victims, 10 to 15 years, possibly more depending on the total amount stolen. And that's if they take a plea deal. I sat back in the chair. 15 years. Emma would be 22. Tyler would be 20. I need to protect my children, I said. And myself, legally and financially. Thompson nodded. I'll refer you to a colleague who handles divorce cases. Given the criminal nature of your wife's activities, you'll want to file immediately and establish that you had no knowledge of or involvement in these crimes. The families of the victims will likely file civil suits as well. You need to be legally separated from her assets before that happens. He made a call. 20 minutes later, I was in another office 3 blocks away, meeting with Patricia Brennan, no relation to the doctor, she assured me, who specialized in high-conflict divorces. She was younger than Thompson, early 40s, with the kind of focused energy that suggested she rarely lost cases. Emergency filing, she said, after I'd explained the situation. We'll request immediate separation of assets, temporary custody of the children, and a restraining order if necessary. Given the criminal investigation, the court will likely grant everything. When were you planning to tell your wife you know? I wasn't. I was going to let the authorities handle it. She considered this. That's actually smart. Less chance of her hiding assets or fleeing if she doesn't know an investigation is underway. But you need to remove your children from the home before arrests are made. You don't want them to witness that. My chest tightened. When? Based on what you've described, I'd estimate the state will move within 48 hours, maybe sooner. Can you take the kids somewhere? A relative's house? My parents lived in Cleveland, 2 hours north. Yes. Do it tonight. Tell your wife it's a short visit, something casual, then stay there until after the arrests. I'll have the divorce papers filed by end of business today. I left her office at 3:15 p.m. with a plan and a retainer agreement. The call from Detective Walters came at 6:47 a.m. Thursday morning. I'd been awake for hours, sitting at my parents' kitchen table in Cleveland with cold coffee and my phone. Emma and Tyler were still asleep upstairs. I'd told them we were visiting Grandma and Grandpa for a few days. An adventure, nothing to worry about. Tyler had been excited. Emma had asked why Mommy wasn't coming. "Mr. Patterson? This is Detective James Walters with Columbus PD. We met yesterday regarding the Serenview Manor investigation." I remember. My voice came out rough. I hadn't slept. "We executed warrants at the facility and your wife's residence this morning at 5:30 a.m. Both Rebecca Patterson and David Klein are in custody. I wanted to inform you personally before it hits the news." David Klein. So that was his name? What did you find? Enough to justify the arrests. The state inspectors are at Serenview now with medical personnel. We're transporting residents to Columbus General for evaluation. The physical evidence you provided matched what we found in Ms. Patterson's office. Additional ledgers, falsified medical records, power of attorney documents with forged signatures. He paused. "Mr. Patterson, this is going to be a major case. Media will be involved. You should prepare yourself and your children. They're safe. They're with me." "Good. Child Services won't need to intervene then. We'll need you to come in for a formal statement, but that can wait until Monday if you need time." After he hung up, I sat there watching dawn break over my parents' backyard. The swing set my father had built 30 years ago still stood in the corner, rusted but solid. I'd pushed Emma and Tyler on those swings last summer. Rebecca had been there too, laughing, taking pictures on her phone. I pulled up the news on my laptop at 7:15 a.m. The first article appeared at 7:42 a.m. Columbus Assisted Living Facility shut down amid elder abuse investigation. By 8 a.m., there were 3 more. By 9 a.m., Rebecca's photo was on Channel 4's website. My phone started ringing at 8:30 a.m. Unknown numbers, mostly. I let them go to voicemail. The third message was from a reporter at the Columbus Dispatch. The fifth was from Rebecca's mother. I deleted that one without listening. Patricia Brennan called at 9:47 a.m. "The arrests are public," she said without preamble. "Your emergency custody filing just got a lot stronger. The prosecutor's office called me. They want to coordinate. Rebecca's being held on $500,000 bond. The accomplice, David Klein, is at $750,000. Neither has posted yet." Will they? Unlikely. These charges carry serious time and flight risk is high. The prosecutor mentioned they're looking at additional charges: insurance fraud, forgery, conspiracy. They found evidence of at least 8 other residents who died in the past 18 months with suspicious asset transfers right before death. My stomach turned. 8. The medical examiner is reviewing death certificates now. "Mr. Patterson, this is going to get worse before it gets better. The families of deceased residents are going to file wrongful death suits. There may be federal charges if they moved money across state lines. You need to prepare for a long legal battle. I just want my kids protected." They will be. No judge will grant her custody now, but you should consider counseling for them when they're old enough to understand what their mother did. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The doorbell rang at 11:23 a.m. My mother answered it while I was upstairs checking on the kids. They were playing with old toys from my childhood, oblivious. "David?" My mother's voice carried up the stairs, uncertain. "There's someone here to see you." I found a man in his 60s standing in the foyer, gray suit, tired eyes. He held a worn leather briefcase. "Mr. Patterson? My name is Robert Caldwell. I'm an attorney representing the family of Margaret Ashford. She was a resident at Serenview Manor until her death last April." My mother retreated to the kitchen. I led Caldwell to the living room. I saw the news this morning, he continued, sitting on the edge of my father's recliner. Mrs. Ashford's daughter, Jennifer, hired me 6 months ago. Her mother died suddenly. Stroke, according to the death certificate. But 2 weeks before she died, Mrs. Ashford transferred $340,000 from her accounts to something called Ashford Family Trust. Jennifer never heard of this trust. The bank said her mother had signed all the paperwork, but Jennifer swears the signature wasn't right. David Klein, I said. What? The financial advisor. That's his name. David Klein. Caldwell opened his briefcase and pulled out a photograph. Is this him? It was the same man from the facility. Younger in the photo, maybe 5 years ago, but the same face. That's him. Where did you get this? Bank security footage from when the trust was established. The bank manager remembered him because he came in with Mrs. Ashford 3 times. Said she seemed confused, disoriented. He approved the transactions anyway. Caldwell's jaw tightened. Mr. Patterson, I've been investigating this for months. I found 2 other families with similar stories. Elderly relatives at Serenview, sudden deaths, missing assets. But I couldn't prove anything. The facility's records were clean. The death certificates were signed by a Dr. Nathan Cross. Everything looked legitimate. Dr. Cross was prescribing the sedatives. You have evidence? The police do. I recorded conversations. I have photographs of the medication logs. Caldwell leaned forward. Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you something, and I apologize for the indelicacy. How did you discover what was happening at Serenview? The news says an anonymous tip led to the investigation, but you filed for divorce the same day the police were contacted. That's not a coincidence. I stared at him. Outside, I could hear Tyler laughing at something Emma said. My wife was having an affair, I said finally, with David Klein. Someone sent me proof. I followed her to confirm it. That's how I found the facility. Someone sent you proof. Caldwell set down the photograph. Do you know who? No. But they knew about the affair. They knew where and when it was happening. They wanted you to find out. He paused. Mr. Patterson, someone wanted this exposed. Someone with inside knowledge. I hadn't thought about it that way. The anonymous message had felt like cruelty. A stranger destroying my life for unknown reasons. But Caldwell was right. The tipster had known exactly what would happen if I followed Rebecca. They'd known I'd investigate. They'd known I'd find Serenview. The families I've been working with, Caldwell said quietly, they deserve justice. Mrs. Ashford's daughter is a school teacher. The money her mother saved for 40 years, gone. Another family, the Bishops, their father's estate was worth $420,000. He died last July. They got $12,000 and a box of worthless personal effects. How many victims total? That I know of? 5 confirmed deaths with suspicious asset transfers. But if what you're saying is true about the current residents, he shook his head. This could be dozens. And it's been going on for at least 2 years, maybe longer. The scale of it settled over me like a weight. Rebecca hadn't just betrayed me. She'd systematically destroyed families, stolen life savings, possibly killed people. The woman I'd married, the mother of my children, had done this. The prosecutor will want to talk to you, I said. Detective Walters with Columbus PD is the lead investigator. I'll contact him today. Caldwell stood, then hesitated. Mr. Patterson, I'm sorry for what you're going through, for what your children will go through. But what you did, reporting this, gathering evidence, you saved lives. The residents still at that facility, they're alive because of you. After he left, I sat in the living room for a long time. Through the window, I could see my father in the garage, organizing tools. My mother was in the kitchen making lunch. Upstairs, Emma and Tyler were safe, playing innocent. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. News says they arrested her. Good. She deserved worse. I stared at the message. The same number that had sent me the original photos. I typed back, "Who are you?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Someone who knew what she was doing. Someone who couldn't stop it alone. My hands tightened on the phone. Why me? Because you're the only person she might have actually cared about. I thought if you knew about the affair, you'd dig deeper. I was right. You used me. I gave you the truth. What you did with it was your choice. Those people at Serenview are alive because you made the right one. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel manipulated, used. But all I felt was tired. Who are you? I typed again. This time, the response came quickly. A nurse who couldn't watch it happen anymore. That's all you need to know. The dots appeared one more time. Take care of your kids. They're going to need you. Then nothing. The courtroom smelled like old wood and recycled air. I sat in the gallery behind the prosecutor's table, watching Rebecca and Klein enter through the side door in matching orange jumpsuits. 3 months had passed since their arrest. 3 months of depositions, discovery hearings, and watching my wife's carefully constructed lies unravel thread by thread. Rebecca's auburn hair had lost its shine. She'd dropped weight. Her jumpsuit hung loose on her frame. She didn't look at me as the bailiff guided her to the defense table. Klein walked with his shoulders hunched, a far cry from the confident man I'd photographed at the Riverside Inn. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Brennan. Different Brennan. I'd learned that detail weeks ago when Dr. Michael Cross, the physician who'd prescribed the sedatives, took a plea deal. He'd given up everything in exchange for 15 years instead of life. Turned out the good doctor had been skimming his own share, writing prescriptions for medications that were never administered, selling them on the side while Rebecca and Klein drained bank accounts. Judge Brennan took her seat. She was in her 60s, gray hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. She'd presided over elder abuse cases for 2 decades. The prosecution had requested her specifically. We're here for the plea hearing in the matter of the state of Ohio versus Rebecca Patterson and David Klein, she said. Multiple counts of elder abuse, financial exploitation of the elderly, conspiracy to commit fraud, and in the deaths of 8 residents, charges of involuntary manslaughter. My hands gripped the wooden bench. 8 confirmed deaths. The medical examiner had exhumed bodies, reviewed autopsy reports, traced medication records. 8 people who'd been over-sedated, who'd developed complications, who'd died while Rebecca and Klein transferred their assets to shell accounts. Margaret Parker's family sat 3 rows ahead of me. Her daughter Susan had flown in from Seattle when she'd learned her mother's estate. $847,000 accumulated over a lifetime of teaching had vanished into accounts controlled by Serenview Financial Services, LLC. A company that existed only on paper, registered to a P.O. box, with David Klein listed as the managing partner. Ms. Patterson, you've agreed to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 25 years to life. Is that correct? Rebecca's attorney, a public defender named James Walsh, who'd taken the case when her private lawyer quit, stood. Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Klein, you've agreed to the same terms? Klein's attorney, a tired-looking woman in a wrinkled suit, nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The plea deals had come after the prosecution laid out their evidence. Bank records showing $3.8 million stolen from 12 residents over 18 months. Email chains between Rebecca and Klein discussing inventory and liquidation schedules. Text messages where they joked about warehousing the merchandise while waiting for families to stop visiting. That phrase had made me sick for days. Judge Brennan reviewed the documents in front of her. I've read the victim impact statements. 12 families destroyed. 8 people dead. Lives ended not through natural causes, but through systematic drugging and neglect. Also, you could steal their money. She looked up at Rebecca. Ms. Patterson, you held a position of trust. These people and their families believed you were caring for their loved ones in their final years. Instead, you turned Serenview Manor into a criminal enterprise. Rebecca's shoulders shook. She was crying, or performing tears. I couldn't tell anymore. Mr. Klein, you posed as a financial advisor, convinced families to sign over power of attorney, then systematically drained accounts. You preyed on people who trusted you with their parents' well-being. Klein stared at the table. Before I accept these pleas, I want to hear from the victims' families. We'll start with Susan Parker. Margaret's daughter stood. She was in her 50s, wearing a black dress, holding a photograph. She approached the podium with steady steps. My mother was a 4th-grade teacher for 37 years, Susan said. Her voice didn't waver. She saved every penny. She lived modestly so she could leave something for her grandchildren's education. She had $847,000 when she entered Serenview Manor with early-stage Alzheimer's. Susan held up the photograph, an elderly Asian woman with a bright smile, surrounded by children. This was taken at her retirement party. She was sharp, funny, loved crossword puzzles. When I visited her at Serenview 6 months later, she couldn't stay awake. The staff said it was the disease progressing. I believed them. Her voice cracked. I trusted Rebecca Patterson. She showed me charts, medication schedules, care plans. She said Mom was getting the best treatment. Meanwhile, she was drugging her unconscious and stealing everything Mom worked her entire life to save. Susan set the photograph on the podium. Mom died 3 months ago. Pneumonia, they said. But the medical examiner found she'd been over-sedated for months. Her lungs filled with fluid because she couldn't move, couldn't cough, couldn't function. She drowned in her own bed while Rebecca Patterson cashed out her investment accounts. Judge Brennan's expression remained neutral, but I saw her jaw tighten. My mother's money is gone. The accounts were emptied, transferred through shell companies, laundered through real estate purchases that were immediately flipped. We've recovered less than 10%. My children won't get the education their grandmother sacrificed to provide. And I have to live knowing I put her in that place. I trusted the wrong people. Susan picked up the photograph. 25 years isn't enough, but it's what the prosecutor recommended to guarantee a conviction. So I accept it. I just want the court to know that my mother mattered. She wasn't inventory. She was a person who deserved dignity and care. She returned to her seat. Her husband put his arm around her. 4 more families spoke. Each story followed the same pattern: trust, betrayal, theft, death. Robert Miller, a Korean War veteran who'd saved $623,000. Dorothy Williams, a widow who'd sold her house and banked $412,000. Thomas Green, a retired accountant with $891,000 in retirement funds. Patricia Lee, a nurse who'd accumulated $500 to $34,000. All dead. All robbed. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, no relation to Rebecca's lawyer, stood when the statements concluded. She was in her 40s, built her career on elder abuse cases, and had spent 3 months building an ironclad case. Your Honor, the state believes these sentences are appropriate given the scope of the crimes. Ms. Patterson and Mr. Klein have agreed to cooperate fully in asset recovery efforts and to testify against any additional conspirators we identify. They've waived their right to appeal. In exchange, we're recommending 25 years to life rather than pursuing maximum consecutive sentences that could have resulted in over 200 years. She glanced at Rebecca and Klein. They'll be eligible for parole in 25 years. Given their ages, Ms. Patterson is 34, Mr. Klein is 37. They'll be nearly 60 before they can even apply. The parole board will consider the severity of their crimes, their behavior in prison, and whether they've made meaningful restitution to their victims. Judge Brennan nodded. Ms. Patterson, Mr. Klein, please stand. They stood. Rebecca's legs shook. Klein kept his eyes down. I accept your guilty pleas. On all counts of elder abuse, financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit fraud, and involuntary manslaughter, I sentence you each to 25 years to life in the Ohio Department of Corrections. You'll serve your sentences in separate facilities. You're prohibited from contacting each other or any of the victims' families. The gavel came down. Rebecca's knees buckled. Her attorney caught her arm. Klein stood rigid, staring at nothing. Serenview Manor's operating license has been permanently revoked, Judge Brennan continued. The facility has been closed, and the remaining residents have been transferred to licensed care facilities. The state has seized all assets connected to Serenview Financial Services and will continue efforts to recover stolen funds. She looked at the families in the gallery. I know this doesn't undo the harm. Your loved ones are gone. The money may never be fully recovered. But I hope knowing these defendants will spend decades in prison provides some measure of justice. The bailiffs moved forward. Rebecca turned as they handcuffed her, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, she looked directly at me. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged, face pale. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it. What was there to say? They led her out through the side door. Klein followed. The courtroom began to empty. I sat there for another 10 minutes, watching people file out. Susan Parker walked past, still holding her mother's photograph. She glanced at me, nodded once. I nodded back. My phone buzzed. A text from my attorney, Robert Fisher. Divorce finalized. All assets awarded to you. She signed everything. Of course she did. What choice did she have? I stood, straightened my tie, and walked out into the hallway. News cameras clustered near the elevator. I took the stairs. The call came on a Wednesday morning, 6 months after the sentencing. I was at my desk reviewing production schedules when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I'd learned to answer every call these days. The investigation had generated dozens of contacts with attorneys, victim advocates, and law enforcement. Mr. Patterson, this is Detective Angela Morris with Columbus PD. We met briefly during the Serenview investigation. I remembered her. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of cop who noticed everything. Detective, what can I do for you? I need you to come down to the station. There's been a development in your wife's case. My stomach tightened. What kind of development? I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you be here this afternoon? 2 hours later, I sat across from Detective Morris in a windowless interview room that smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. She slid a folder across the table. "We've been working with federal investigators," she said, "following the money trail from Serenview. What we've found is extensive." I opened the folder. Bank statements, property records, corporate filings. Names I didn't recognize attached to LLCs and trusts. "Your wife and David Klein didn't work alone," Morris continued. "We've identified a network of at least 6 facilities across 3 states operating similar schemes. Different owners of record, but the same operational structure. Same medication protocols. Same financial advisor connections." The documents blurred slightly as I processed this. "How many victims?" "We're still counting. At least 40 confirmed so far. Probably more." 40 families. 40 people who'd trusted these facilities with their loved ones' care and life savings. "There's something else." Morris pulled out another document. "We found communications between your wife and someone using encrypted messaging. Took our tech people 3 months to crack it. The person on the other end was providing the operational blueprint, how to identify vulnerable targets, which medications to use, how to structure the financial theft to avoid detection." She showed me a printed message thread. Clinical instructions mixed with reassurance. "Don't worry about the families. By the time they notice, the assets will be clean. If anyone gets suspicious, increase the dosage. Confusion is your friend." My hands clenched on the table edge. "We believe this person has been running this scheme for years, recruiting people like your wife to execute it. Rebecca and Klein were franchisees essentially. They paid a percentage of their take upward." "Do you know who it is?" Morris hesitated. "We have a suspect. That's why I called you. We need your help." She pulled out a photograph. A woman in her 60s, professionally dressed, smiling at some charity event. Distinguished looking. The kind of person you'd trust immediately. Dr. Patricia Brennan. She ran a geriatric care consulting firm based in Cleveland. Advised facilities on optimization and efficiency. We think she used that access to identify potential recruits and vulnerable facilities. I stared at the photo. This woman had created the system that destroyed my family. That killed 8 people at Serenview alone. That left Emma and Tyler without a mother. "What do you need from me?" Rebecca's agreed to testify against Brennan in exchange for a reduced sentence. 20 years instead of 25 to life. The prosecutor wants to prepare her, and she's asking to see you first. The room felt suddenly smaller. "Why?" "She says she needs to explain. That there are things you need to understand before the trial." Morris's expression was carefully neutral. "You don't have to agree. But her testimony is crucial. Brennan's attorneys are good, and we need Rebecca credible on the stand." I looked at the photograph again. At the woman who'd architected this horror. "When?" The visitation room at the Ohio Reformatory for Women was nothing like the movies. No glass partition, no phones, just a table bolted to the floor and plastic chairs designed to be uncomfortable. Rebecca looked different. Thinner. Her auburn hair pulled back severely. No makeup. Prison scrubs instead of the designer clothes she'd favored. But her eyes were the same, calculating, even now. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. I didn't respond. Just sat down and waited. She folded her hands on the table. "I know you hate me. You should. But I need you to understand something before I testify. The detective said you wanted to explain." Patricia Brennan recruited me 2 years ago. She approached me at a healthcare conference, said she'd been watching my career, that I had potential. Rebecca's voice was flat, rehearsed. She made it sound like a legitimate consulting opportunity at first. Help facilities improve their financial operations. Maximize estate planning for residents. When did you realize what it actually was? By the time I understood, I was already involved. She's careful. Everything builds gradually. First, it's just aggressive estate planning. Then it's encouraging residents to update their wills. Then it's more. You could have stopped. Could I? For the first time, emotion cracked through. She has files on everyone she recruits. Evidence of the early stages before you realize what you're doing. If I'd tried to leave, she would have destroyed me, sent me to prison while she walked away clean. So instead, you drugged elderly people and stole their life savings. Rebecca flinched. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm telling you how she operates. She finds people with ambition, with financial pressure, with something to prove. She gives them a path to success and makes sure they can't turn back. I thought about the Rebecca I'd married. Driven, yes. Ambitious. But not cruel. Not a monster. When had the transformation happened? Or had I simply never seen who she really was? Why David Klein? Patricia set that up too. She has a network of financial advisors who work with her recruits. David was assigned to me. The affair, she looked away. That was real. Or I thought it was. Now I think even that was part of her design. Keep us isolated. Make sure we only trusted each other. The nurse who sent me the evidence. Do you know who that was? Rebecca's expression shifted to something like fear. That's what I needed to tell you. There is no nurse at Serenview. We were careful about hiring. Everyone was vetted. Then who? I think it was Patricia. She knew you were a plant manager, detail-oriented, methodical. She knew if you discovered the affair, you'd investigate everything. You'd find Serenview. You'd bring it all down. Rebecca leaned forward. Don't you see? We were getting sloppy. David was talking about expanding too fast. I was pushing back on some of the medication protocols. We were becoming a liability. The room tilted slightly as I processed this. She wanted us caught. She burns her franchises every few years, before they get too big, too noticeable. Then she starts fresh with new people in new locations. We were due. Rebecca's voice dropped. She probably has 3 more operations running right now. And when we testify, when she goes to trial, she'll have already set up the next generation. Detective Morris had said they'd identified 6 facilities. If Rebecca was right, there were more. Always more. The prosecutor thinks your testimony will put her away. It will. But she's built this system to survive. She has lawyers, shell companies, cutouts. Even if she goes to prison, the network continues. Rebecca met my eyes. I'm telling you this because you're the only person who might actually stop it. You found Serenview. You documented everything. You don't give up. I'm not a cop. No, but you're relentless. And you have a reason to see this through that no detective ever will. She glanced toward the guard station. They're going to call time soon. I need you to promise me something. I don't owe you anything. Not for me, for Emma and Tyler. Her voice cracked. Make sure this ends. Really ends. So no other kids lose their parent to this. So no other families get destroyed. The guard called 5 minutes. Rebecca stood, then paused. The anonymous texts. Did you keep the phone number? Yes. Give it to the FBI. They can trace it better than local police. If I'm right about Patricia sending them, it's evidence of conspiracy. Proof she orchestrated our exposure. She turned toward the door, then looked back. I loved you. That was real. Everything else, I don't know anymore what was real and what was her design. But I loved you. I watched her walk away, escorted back to whatever cell she now called home. 20 years if her testimony helped convict Brennan. 20 years to think about 8 deaths and 40 victims and 2 children growing up without their mother. I pulled out my phone and found Detective Morris's number. It's David Patterson. I need you to connect me with whoever's running the federal investigation. I have information about the anonymous tip that started this. Outside, the afternoon sun was too bright. I sat in my car and looked at the saved messages from that unknown number. The photos of Rebecca and Klein, the hotel details, the carefully worded concern. Sorry, man. Thought you should know. Not a nurse trying to do the right thing. A puppet master cutting strings. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Picking up the kids at 4. Pizza. Okay for dinner. Emma and Tyler. 7 and 5 when this started. 8 and 6 now. Growing up while I chased justice through courtrooms and police stations. I started the engine. The federal investigators would want to meet soon. There would be more interviews, more documentation, more late nights building cases. But first, pizza with my kids. First, normal. Or whatever passed for normal now. The reformatory disappeared in my rearview mirror. Somewhere inside, Rebecca was preparing to testify against the woman who'd orchestrated her fall. Somewhere else, Patricia Brennan was probably recruiting the next generation of operators, building new schemes on the bones of old ones. Detective Morris had said 40 victims so far. I intended to make sure there weren't 41. The meeting with Detective Morris happened 2 days later in a conference room at the FBI field office. I'd expected just her, maybe one federal agent. Instead, I walked into a room with 8 people. Morris, 3 FBI agents, 2 assistant U.S. attorneys, someone from the Department of Justice Elder Justice Initiative, and a woman who introduced herself as Special Agent Lauren Mitchell from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Mr. Patterson, thank you for coming, Mitchell said, gesturing to a chair at the head of the table. We've been building a case against Patricia Brennan for 18 months. Your wife's information has given us more in 2 days than we've gathered in all that time. I sat down, the folder containing the anonymous number printout heavy in my hands. Rebecca said there might be 3 facilities currently operating, that people are being drugged and robbed right now. We're aware. One of the assistant U.S. attorneys, a man named James Garrett, leaned forward. We've identified 2 facilities with high probability connections to Brennan's network, one in Pennsylvania, one in Arizona. We're working with local authorities to build probable cause for search warrants. Working to build probable cause? I heard my voice rise. People are dying. Can't you just... We need evidence that will hold up in court, Mitchell interrupted. If we move too fast, defense attorneys will get everything thrown out. Brennan walks, and the network continues operating. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. I understood the logic. I'd made similar arguments about proper procedures at the plant. But this wasn't about manufacturing tolerances or safety protocols. This was about elderly people being systematically poisoned while bureaucrats dotted I's and crossed T's. How long? I asked. 72 hours for the Pennsylvania facility, Morris said. Maybe a week for Arizona. We're moving as fast as we can. I slid the folder across the table. The anonymous number. Rebecca thinks it was Brennan herself, eliminating a liability. Mitchell opened the folder, studied the printout. We'll run it through our systems. The number's probably a burner, but sometimes people get careless. There's something else, I said. Rebecca mentioned Brennan has a consulting firm. She said it's designed to survive even if Brennan goes to prison. What does that mean? The federal agents exchanged glances. Finally, Mitchell spoke. We believe Brennan operates through a network of shell companies and offshore accounts. She recruits facility managers, provides them with protocols and connections to corrupt financial advisors, then takes a percentage of the proceeds. If one operation gets exposed, she burns it and moves on. Like a franchise, I said. Exactly like a franchise. And like any good franchise, the system can operate without the founder. We arrest Brennan, someone else steps into her role. The infrastructure remains intact. So what's the answer? We dismantle the entire network simultaneously, Garrett said. Arrest everyone at once, seize all the assets, burn it down from the inside. That's why we need time. We get one shot at this. I thought about the residents at Sarenview. Margaret Foster, who died alone while her daughter thought she was receiving excellent care. Harold Parker? No, I needed to stop thinking of them by name. It made it too personal, too immediate. But it was personal. It was immediate. What do you need from me? I asked. Rebecca's cooperation is crucial, Mitchell said. She's given us names, locations, procedures. But we need her to testify about Brennan directly. Can you convince her to do that? I'm not her lawyer. I'm not even talking to her except through attorneys. We know. But she might listen to you about this. She's looking at 25 to life. If she helps us take down the entire network, we can talk to the judge about reducing her sentence. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You want me to offer her a deal? We want you to tell her the option exists. What she does with that information is up to her. I stood up. No. Mr. Patterson? No. I gave you everything I have. I'll testify at trial if you need me. But I'm not playing messenger between you and my wife. I'm not giving her hope for a reduced sentence. She made her choices. Mitchell's expression didn't change. We understand. The offer stands if you change your mind. I left the federal building and sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, trying to process what they'd asked. They wanted me to dangle hope in front of Rebecca. To be the one who told her she might see freedom again if she just cooperated a little more. The smart play would be to do it. Help the feds, take down the network, save lives. Rebecca's sentence was irrelevant compared to stopping an operation that had killed dozens of people and would kill dozens more. But I couldn't do it. Couldn't be the one to offer her that lifeline. My phone buzzed. A text from my attorney, William Foster. Need to discuss custody hearing. Can you come by office today? The divorce proceedings had moved forward with mechanical efficiency. Rebecca's arrest had simplified things considerably. No judge was going to award custody to someone facing elder abuse and manslaughter charges. But there were still procedures, still hearings, still endless paperwork. I texted back, on my way. Foster's office was in a renovated warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. He met me in the lobby, looking unusually serious. We have a problem, he said, leading me to his office. Rebecca's attorney filed a motion this morning requesting supervised visitation with Emma and Tyler. I felt my jaw tighten. Absolutely not. I expected that reaction, but legally, she has a right to request it. The judge will make the final decision. She's in jail for drugging elderly people and stealing their money. She's not going anywhere near my kids. The argument her attorney is making is that she's never posed a danger to children, that her crimes were financially motivated, and that maintaining the parent-child relationship is in the children's best interest. Foster held up a hand before I could respond. I'm not saying I agree. I'm telling you what we're up against. When's the hearing? Next Tuesday. Judge Kimberly Walsh. She's generally reasonable, tends to side with child welfare over parental rights in cases like this. Cases like this. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. How many cases like this are there? You'd be surprised. Not elder abuse specifically, but parents in jail requesting visitation. It's more common than you'd think. I thought about Emma asking why Mommy didn't live with us anymore. About Tyler having nightmares. About the careful explanations I'd given them. Age-appropriate versions of the truth that still felt like lies. What do I need to do? Show up. Testify if asked. Let me handle the legal arguments. Foster pulled out a file. I've also been contacted by several families of Sarenview residents. They're filing civil suits against Rebecca, Klein, and the facility. They want to know if you'd be willing to testify as a witness. To what? I didn't know anything about the facility until I found those documents. You can testify to Rebecca's deception, to what you discovered when you visited Sarenview, to the recordings you made. It helps establish the pattern of behavior. More testimony. More reliving that day. More sitting in rooms explaining how I'd been married to someone for 9 years without knowing who she really was. Fine, I said. Whatever helps the families. Foster studied me for a moment. How are you holding up? I'm managing. That's not what I asked. I looked out the window at the Columbus skyline. 2 weeks ago, I'd been a plant manager with a normal life. Now I was coordinating with federal agents and preparing for custody hearings and trying to explain to my children why their mother was gone. I'm angry, I said finally. I'm angry that she did this. I'm angry that I didn't see it. I'm angry that there are more facilities out there right now, and it's going to take the feds 72 hours to maybe shut down one of them. I'm angry that she gets to request visitation like she's just some normal parent going through a divorce instead of someone who killed 8 people. That's fair. And I'm scared. Because the FBI wants me to help convince her to testify, and part of me wants to do it because it might save lives, but another part of me just wants her to rot in prison and never speak to her again. Foster nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Let the feds do their job without you. Focus on your kids and your own recovery. Yeah, I stood up. I need to pick up Emma and Tyler from my parents' house. Anything else? Just the hearing on Tuesday. I'll email you the details. I drove to my parents' house in Upper Arlington, the familiar route giving me time to think. The FBI had their investigation. Foster had the divorce and custody proceedings. The families had their civil suits. Everyone had their role in dismantling what Rebecca had built. And me? I had 2 kids who needed their father to be present, to be stable, to be something other than the angry, scared mess I felt like inside. I could do that. I'd been good at my job because I could compartmentalize, could focus on the task at hand while keeping the bigger picture in mind. This wasn't so different. Except it was completely different, and pretending otherwise was just another form of denial. The FBI agent's card sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I touched it again. Special Agent Lauren Mitchell had called twice, left voicemails asking me to think about what we discussed. I knew what she wanted, Rebecca's continued cooperation, more details about Brennan's network, names and locations that could save lives. I also knew what it would cost me. The kids were at my parents' house for the weekend. Emma had started having nightmares, vague, shapeless things she couldn't articulate, but I knew the source. Tyler was too young to understand why Mommy couldn't come home, but old enough to ask questions I didn't know how to answer. I picked up the card, stared at Mitchell's direct number. My phone rang. Different number, but I recognized the area code. The state prison. "This is a collect call from," Rebecca's voice, small and hollow. "An inmate at Ohio Reformatory for Women. To accept charges, press 1. I should have hung up. Instead, my finger found the button. "David?" Her voice cracked. "Thank you for—" "The FBI wants more information," I said, cutting through whatever script she'd prepared. "About Brennan's other facilities." Silence. Then, "I told them everything I know." "Mitchell doesn't think so." "Mitchell can think whatever she wants." Rebecca's tone shifted, harder. "I gave them 6 locations, testified about the entire operation. What more do they want?" "Names, dates, financial records. Enough to build airtight cases before Brennan's lawyers bury everything in motions and delays." "I don't have access to—" "You had access to enough to steal nearly $4 million. My hand tightened on the phone. "You had access to medical records, bank accounts, legal documents. You're telling me you don't remember details?" Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Calculating. "What's in it for me?" "Seriously? I'm already serving 20 years, David. My lawyer says with good behavior, maybe 15. Why would I give them more ammunition unless it helps me?" "Because people are dying." I stood, paced to the window. "Because right now, while we're having this conversation, there are elderly people being drugged and robbed. Because maybe, just maybe, you could do one decent thing." I did a decent thing. I cooperated. I testified. "You made a deal to save your own skin. And you want me to do more? For what? A clear conscience?" She laughed, bitter and sharp. "My conscience died about 18 months ago, David. Right around the time I realized that the system I was working in, the legitimate, legal, state-licensed system, was already exploiting these people. We just cut out the middleman." "That's your justification?" "That's reality. You know what Medicare pays for assisted living? What families can actually afford? The whole industry runs on exploitation. We just made it more efficient." I closed my eyes. This was the woman I'd married. The woman who'd read bedtime stories to our children, who'd organized bake sales for Emma's school, who'd cried at sappy commercials. Somewhere in the past 9 years, she'd become this. Or maybe she'd always been this, and I'd been too blind to see it. "Mitchell thinks Brennan has at least 3 more facilities operating," I said. "Maybe more. She needs details, staff names, corporate structures, anything that can help them move faster. I told you I don't have—" "Your lover does." The line went quiet. "Klein kept records," I continued. "Had to, for the financial side. Bank transfers, shell companies, investment accounts. He's facing the same sentence you are. Maybe more, since he was the one actually moving the money." "David's not going to talk? David's not as smart as you are." I kept my voice level. "He's already made mistakes. His lawyer's a public defender who's in over his head. The FBI knows this. They're going to squeeze him until he breaks. So let them. Or you could get ahead of it. Provide information first. Show you're still cooperating, still valuable." "Why do you care?" The question came out sharp. You got what you wanted. I'm in prison. The kids are safe. Why are you helping the FBI build their case? I looked at the photo on the mantle. Emma and Tyler at the zoo last summer. Faces sticky with ice cream, laughing at something outside the frame. Rebecca had taken that picture, had smiled and made silly faces to get them to laugh. Because Mitchell showed me something, I said quietly. A file on one of the victims from a facility in Pennsylvania. Eleanor Grant, 83. Former teacher. Widowed. Her daughter visited every Sunday until the staff said she was too confused for visits. 3 months later, Eleanor was dead. Overdose of sedatives. Her estate, $200,000, gone. The daughter tried to sue, but the facility had documentation showing Eleanor had willingly transferred everything to a financial advisor. Rebecca said nothing. The daughter's name is Amanda. She's 36, has 2 kids of her own. She spent a year thinking her mother died naturally, that she'd somehow lost her savings to dementia and bad decisions. Now she knows the truth. Knows her mother spent her final months drugged, confused, alone. Knows someone deliberately kept her away while they stole everything. David. Emma's going to be 36 someday. She's going to remember her mother. Not the woman who read her stories, but the woman who drugged old people and stole their money. That's the legacy you're leaving. You think I don't know that? Her voice broke. You think I don't lie awake every night thinking about what I've done, what I've become? Then do something about it. It won't change anything. Won't bring back the people who died. Won't give me back my family. No, I agreed. But it might stop the next Eleanor Grant from dying alone and confused. Might save the next Amanda from spending years wondering if she could have done more. The line crackled with static. I could hear Rebecca breathing, uneven and shallow. There's a facility in Michigan, she said finally. Outside Detroit. Brennan set it up about 6 months before Serenview. Same structure, legitimate licensed facility, carefully selected staff, financial advisor on retainer. I grabbed a pen, started writing on the back of Mitchell's card. The director's name is Janet Russo. Former nurse, lost her license in Illinois for something. I don't know what. Brennan has a thing for hiring people with damaged credentials. Easier to control. What else? The financial advisor was David's cousin, Michael Klein. They ran the same playbook. Identify residents with assets, no close family, gradually increase sedation, forge power of attorney documents. How many victims? I don't know exact numbers, but the facility has 60 beds. Maybe 15, 20 residents fit the profile. I kept writing. What's it called? Meadowbrook Senior Living. It's in Warren, just outside the city. Other locations? One in Indiana, Greenfield. I don't remember the name, but it's the only assisted living facility in town, so it shouldn't be hard to find. Director there is a man, Thomas something. Brennan recruited him from a facility that got shut down for violations. How do you know all this? We had meetings, quarterly, usually at hotels. Brennan called them professional development seminars. Really just check-ins, make sure everyone was following protocol, discuss any problems. She paused. The last one was in Cleveland about 6 weeks before you found out. Brennan seemed nervous, kept talking about security, being careful, not leaving digital trails. She knew something was wrong. Maybe. Or maybe she's just paranoid. Hard to tell with her. I filled the back of Mitchell's card, started on a napkin. What about staff? Anyone at these other facilities who might talk? There was a nurse at the Michigan place. Younger woman, maybe late 20s. She seemed uncomfortable during the meetings, didn't participate much. Sarah? No, wait, you said no Sarah. Jennifer. Jennifer Walsh. She might crack if someone pressured her. Anything else? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. The corporate structure runs through a company called Senior Care Solutions Group. It's registered in Delaware, but the actual office is in Columbus. Brennan uses it to funnel money, provide consulting services to the facilities. If the FBI can get those records, they'll have everything. Financial transfers, communications, the whole network. I wrote it down. Mitchell will need you to provide this in an official statement. I know. And testify, if it comes to trial. I know that too. The collect call warning chimed. 1 minute remaining. David, Rebecca said, rushed now. The custody hearing. I know you don't want me to see them, but supervised visitation, I said. Once a month. At a facility with counselors present. Thank you. It's not for you. It's for them. So they don't grow up wondering if I kept them from their mother out of spite. I understand. And Rebecca, if you're lying about any of this, if you're holding back to protect Brennan or yourself or anyone else, I'll make sure that visitation disappears. Permanently. I'm not lying. I swear I'm... The call disconnected. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by silence, staring at the notes I'd scrawled across Mitchell's business card and 3 napkins. Names, locations, details that could shut down facilities, save lives, bring justice to families who'd lost everything. I picked up my phone and dialed Mitchell's number. She answered on the first ring. Patterson? I've got something for you, I said. We need to meet. The coordinated raids happened on a Thursday morning, 6 weeks after my conversation with Rebecca. I watched it unfold on the news from my living room while Emma and Tyler ate breakfast, oblivious to the significance of the helicopters circling facilities in 3 states. Federal agents descended on assisted living facilities in Michigan, Indiana, and Pennsylvania early this morning, the anchor reported. Sources say the raids are connected to an ongoing elder abuse investigation that began in Columbus last year. My phone buzzed. Mitchell. All 3 facilities secured, 47 residents being evaluated, multiple arrests. Thank you. I deleted the message and turned off the television. Dad, can we go to the park? Tyler asked, syrup on his chin. After you finish eating, I said, wiping his face with a napkin. Normal. We were building normal, 1 breakfast at a time. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified on day 4, walking the jury through discovering Rebecca's affair, finding Serenview, documenting the evidence. The defense attorney tried to suggest I'd been motivated by revenge, that my testimony was tainted by personal animosity. Mr. Patterson, isn't it true you were angry at your wife? He asked. Yes, I said. Angry enough to want to see her punished? I wanted the truth exposed. Whether that punished her or not wasn't my concern. Patricia Brennan sat at the defense table, perfectly composed in a gray suit, taking notes like she was attending a business meeting. She looked at me once during my testimony, a brief, calculating glance, then returned to her notepad. Rebecca testified on day 12. I wasn't there. Couldn't be. Foster said she'd been credible, detailed, damning. Had walked the jury through the entire operation, from recruitment to execution to the systematic theft and drugging of residents. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Brennan got 40 years. No possibility of parole for 25. She was 63. She'd die in prison. I felt nothing when I heard the verdict. No satisfaction, no relief, just a distant acknowledgement that it was finished. The civil suits took another year to resolve. The families recovered some of their losses, maybe 30 cents on the dollar after legal fees and the difficulty of tracing laundered money. Not enough. Never enough. But something. Susan Parker called me when her case settled. "We got enough for my kids' college fund," she said. "Not what Mom saved, but enough. I wanted you to know." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. "My daughter asked me the other day if I believed in karma," Susan continued. "I told her I believed in people who do the right thing, even when it's hard. Thank you for being that person." After we hung up, I sat in my office at the plant and stared at production schedules that suddenly seemed trivial. Numbers on spreadsheets, efficiency metrics. None of it mattered the way I'd thought it did. I put in my notice the next week. The supervised visitation happened monthly, like I'd promised. A facility with counselors, security cameras, strict protocols. Rebecca got 1 hour with Emma and Tyler, always monitored, always documented. I watched through a one-way mirror the first time. Saw Rebecca hug them. Saw Emma stiffen slightly. Saw Tyler climb into her lap like nothing had changed. Heard Rebecca ask about school, friends, their favorite movies. She didn't tell them why she was there. Didn't explain what she'd done. That would come later when they were older, when they could understand. For now, she was just Mom, and they were just kids visiting their mother. I stopped watching after that first time. It was too painful, not because I still loved her, but because I'd stopped. The woman in that room was a stranger wearing Rebecca's face, and I couldn't reconcile her with the person I'd married. 2 years after the arrests, I started working for the Ohio Department of Aging as an investigator. The pay was terrible compared to plant management, but the work mattered. I visited facilities, reviewed records, interviewed residents and families. Looking for the signs I'd learned to recognize: the oversedation, the financial irregularities, the too clean documentation. I found 3 operations in the first year. Smaller than Sarenview, less organized than Brennan's network, but the same fundamental exploitation. Each time I documented everything, built the case, coordinated with law enforcement. Each time I thought about Eleanor Grant, about Margaret Parker, about the 8 people who died at Sarenview while I'd been reviewing production schedules and missing what was happening in my own home. Emma turned 11. Tyler turned 9. They asked harder questions now. "Why did Mom do those things?" Emma asked one night, homework spread across the kitchen table. I'd prepared for this conversation, had rehearsed answers with the family therapist we'd been seeing for 2 years. "Your mom made choices that hurt people," I said carefully. She convinced herself those choices were okay, because she wanted things: money, success, security. But they weren't okay. And now she's facing the consequences. Do you think she's sorry? I think she's sorry she got caught. Whether she's sorry for what she did? I don't know. Emma processed this, chewing her pencil. "Mrs. Rodriguez says everyone deserves forgiveness." Mrs. Rodriguez is right, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't matter. It means choosing not to let anger control you. Are you angry? I thought about it. Was I? The sharp, immediate rage had faded. What remained was something more complex: disappointment, sadness, a profound sense of waste. Sometimes, I admitted, but I'm working on it. Good, Emma said, returning to her homework, because being angry all the time seems exhausting. She had no idea how right she was. 5 years after the arrests, I received a letter from Rebecca. The prison had forwarded it through my attorney, per the custody agreement. I almost threw it away without reading it. Instead, I opened it at my kitchen table, late at night, with a glass of whiskey I didn't drink. David, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But the parole board hearing is coming up, and I need you to understand some things. I'm not asking for your support. I'm not asking you to speak on my behalf. I just need you to know that I've spent every day of the past 5 years trying to understand how I became the person who did those things. The therapist here says I compartmentalized, that I separated the work from the reality of what I was doing. The residents weren't people. They were problems to solve, assets to manage, obstacles to overcome. I stopped seeing them as someone's mother, someone's father, someone's entire world. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't forgive myself. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see what I destroyed. Not just our family, but all those other families. The people who trusted me with their loved ones' care and got betrayal instead. Emma and Tyler are growing up without a mother because of choices I made. That's the consequence I deserve. But they're also growing up with a father who showed them what integrity looks like, even when it cost him everything. That's the gift you gave them. I won't contact you again. But I needed you to know that the person who did those things, she's gone. What's left is someone trying to figure out how to live with what she did. Rebecca. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the file with all the other documents from the case, evidence, testimony, court records. The archive of how our life together had ended. The parole board denied her petition. She'd serve at least another 5 years before she could apply again. I didn't tell Emma and Tyler. They'd see their mother at the next supervised visit, and she'd explain it herself or she wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my story to tell. 10 years after that Tuesday afternoon when an anonymous message destroyed and rebuilt my life, I stood in a community center in Columbus, addressing a room full of families with loved ones in assisted living facilities. The warning signs aren't always obvious, I told them. Increased sedation explained as disease progression, reluctance to let family visit without notice, rapid changes in financial arrangements, staff who can't answer basic questions about care plans. A woman in the third row raised her hand. What if the facility seems legitimate? Good reviews, state licensed, professional staff? Serenview Manor was all of those things, I said. So were the 6 facilities in Brennan's network. Credentials matter, but they're not enough. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. Ask questions. Demand documentation. And if you're not satisfied, contact the state ombudsman. After the presentation, people lined up to ask individual questions, share concerns, request resources. I stayed until the last person left, until the community center staff started stacking chairs. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car. A text from Emma. Dad, Tyler and I want to talk to you about something. Can we have family meeting tonight? 13 and 11 now. Growing up fast? Too fast? I texted back. Of course. Pizza. Always pizza. See you at 6. I drove home through Columbus streets I'd traveled for 15 years, past the Riverside Inn where I'd confirmed Rebecca's affair, past the exit for Serenview Manor, demolished 2 years ago, the land still vacant. Past the federal building where I'd met with Mitchell and decided to help, even though it meant confronting Rebecca again. The city looked the same. But I'd changed. The man who'd managed a manufacturing plant and missed what was happening in his own home was gone. What remained was someone who paid attention, who asked questions, who understood that evil often wore a professional smile and carried proper credentials. The family meeting was about high school. Emma wanted to attend a private school with a strong science program. Tyler wanted to know if that meant he'd have to go there too. Normal concerns, normal problems. We talked it through over pizza, costs, logistics, what it would mean for their schedules. Made a plan to visit the school, talk to counselors, make an informed decision together. "Thanks, Dad," Emma said as we cleaned up, "for letting us be part of the choice. It's your education, you should have a say." "Mom never asked what we wanted," Tyler said quietly. "She just decided things." I paused, hands in soapy water. "Your mom was dealing with a lot of things we didn't know about. She made bad choices, but that doesn't mean she didn't love you." "Do you still love her?" Emma asked. I dried my hands, considering the question. Did I? The woman I'd married, the one I'd thought I knew, had never really existed. The woman in prison was a stranger. But somewhere between those two versions was a person I'd shared 9 years with, who'd given me 2 incredible children, who'd laughed at my jokes and held my hand through my father's surgery and made our house a home. "I love who I thought she was," I said finally. "I'm sad about who she actually turned out to be. But mostly, I'm grateful for you two. Because whatever else happened, whatever mistakes were made, we got you. And that's enough." Tyler hugged me. Emma rolled her eyes but smiled. Normal. We'd built it piece by piece, day by day, from the wreckage of what came before. Late that night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in my home office and pulled up the file I kept on my computer. The one I'd never shared with anyone. Not Mitchell, not Foster, not the therapist. It contained every message from the anonymous number. Every photo, every tip, every carefully worded piece of information that had led me to View. I'd trace the number eventually. Not through official channels. Those had dead-ended at a burner phone purchased with cash. But through patient research, cross-referencing the timing of messages with Brennan's known locations, analyzing the language patterns. The sender wasn't Brennan herself. It was someone close to her operation, someone with access to information about Rebecca's schedule, about View's operations, about the whole network. Someone who'd wanted it exposed but couldn't do it themselves without becoming a target. I had my suspicions about who. A name that appeared in multiple documents, always peripheral, never central. Someone smart enough to stay in the shadows while burning everything down. But I'd never pursued it. Never tried to confirm my theory. Because whoever had sent those messages had saved lives. Had stopped an operation that would have continued for years, destroying families and killing vulnerable people. Sometimes justice came from unexpected sources. Sometimes the right thing happened for complicated reasons. I closed the file and shut down my computer. The years passed. Emma graduated high school, headed to college studying bioethics. No surprise there. Tyler found his passion in advocacy work, volunteering with organizations that supported elderly rights. They visited Rebecca occasionally. Less frequently as they got older, as their own lives filled with friends and activities and futures that didn't include a mother in prison. But they didn't abandon her. Didn't pretend she didn't exist. They'd found their own peace with what had happened. Their own way of reconciling the mother who'd read them bedtime stories with the woman who'd drugged elderly people and stolen their life savings. I never found that reconciliation. Never stopped seeing the betrayal, the lies, the systematic cruelty. But I learned to live with it, to carry it without letting it define me. 20 years after that Tuesday afternoon, I retired from the Department of Aging. I'd investigated over 200 facilities, found evidence of abuse or exploitation in 37 cases, helped recover millions in stolen assets, contributed to legislative changes that strengthened oversight and protection. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Somewhere, someone was still exploiting vulnerable people, still stealing from families, still prioritizing profit over human dignity. But I'd done what I could, made a difference where I was able, honored the memory of the 8 people who died at Serenview by making sure their deaths meant something. On my last day, my supervisor, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, who joined the department 5 years earlier, gave me a plaque. In recognition of dedicated service and unwavering commitment to protecting Ohio's most vulnerable citizens. You know the irony? I said, holding the plaque. I stumbled into this, didn't choose it, just followed where the evidence led. That's how most important work happens, Jennifer said. Someone sees something wrong and decides to do something about it. The world changes one decision at a time. Rebecca was released on parole after serving 18 years. I heard about it through my attorney. She'd completed her sentence with good behavior, participated in every rehabilitation program available, expressed genuine remorse to the parole board. She didn't contact me, didn't try to see Emma or Tyler without going through proper channels. Moved to a halfway house in Cleveland, got a job doing data entry, lived quietly. Emma, now 26 and working as a healthcare ethicist, decided to meet her. Tyler, 24 and running a nonprofit advocacy organization, declined. I'm not ready, he told me over coffee. Maybe someday, but not yet. That's your choice to make, I said. No judgment either way. Do you think she's changed? Really changed? I thought about the letter she'd sent 15 years ago, about the reports my attorney had forwarded over the years. Rebecca completing her GED, then an associate's degree, then a bachelor's in social work through a prison program, leading support groups for other inmates, volunteering for every restorative justice initiative the prison offered. I think she's trying, I said. Whether that's enough, that's not for me to decide. I'm 62 now. Emma has 2 kids of her own. Tyler's engaged to a lawyer who specializes in elder law. They've built good lives, despite everything. Maybe because of everything. I think about that Tuesday afternoon sometimes, about the notification that changed everything, the choice to investigate rather than confront, the decision to document and expose rather than walk away. I think about the anonymous sender, whoever they were, about Patricia Brennan serving her 40th year in prison, about Rebecca rebuilding a life from ashes, about the families who lost everything and the residents who were saved. I think about Margaret Parker and Eleanor Grant, and the 8 people who died at Serenview, about the 47 residents rescued from facilities in Michigan, Indiana, and Pennsylvania, about the hundreds more who were protected because of legislative changes and increased oversight. The math doesn't balance. It never will. The people who died can't be brought back. The families who lost their savings can't fully recover. The trust that was broken can't be completely restored. But the work continues. New investigators at the Department of Aging, following protocols I helped establish. Families asking better questions, demanding more accountability. Facilities knowing they're being watched. That exploitation has consequences. Small victories, Incremental progress. The slow, unglamorous work of making the system a little bit better, a little bit safer, a little bit more just. Last week, I received a letter. No return address, postmarked from Cleveland. Inside was a single newspaper clipping, an article about a new state law requiring independent financial oversight for assisted living facilities. Below it, 3 words in handwriting I didn't recognize. Thank you for looking. I don't know who sent it. The anonymous messenger from 20 years ago? Someone whose family member I'd helped? A random stranger who'd followed the case? It doesn't matter. What matters is that when I was confronted with an impossible choice, to look away or to look closer, I chose to look, to question, to investigate, to demand truth even when it destroyed my life. That choice saved lives. It didn't heal all wounds or right all wrongs, but it mattered. In the end, that's all any of us can do. See something wrong and decide whether to look away or look closer. Make one choice, then another, then another. Build a life from the accumulation of those decisions. I chose to look, and I'd make the same choice again.